So when you're dealing with challenging behaviors, you want to start with Plan B. Now, you could consider a Plan C, but you really want to think twice about using a Plan A. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Ross Greene's collaborative proactive solutions model. And we're on our third video in this series. We had the first video about changing our lens. We had a video about identifying lagging skills and unsolved problems. Today is the last of our series, and we're talking about Plan B. Now, we're going to talk about some differences between Plan B, Plan C, Plan A. And we're going to talk about the 3 steps that you want to make sure that you have in your Plan B. Either if you're a parent dealing with your child that sometimes has those challenging behaviors, or if you're a teacher, this works in any setting. So I'm glad that you're here with us today. If you're new to the show, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, retired teacher, and advocate for other families. And my passion is to make sure that your child is safe, happy, and learning every day at school. So I know behavior is one of those really big topics, and I've loved diving into Ross Greene's model, and I encourage you to go to his website for more resources. The other thing, speaking of resources, is if you want, you can type just the word cheat sheets in the comment box, and I will, or not me, but my IEP bot will send you not only 3, but actually 4 different cheat sheets that Dr. Ross Greene has developed. So it's kind of hard to see in the slide, but they're very, very good tools. And I've just downloaded them from his website, so you can get them there. Or like I said, just type in the comments cheat sheets, and my IEP bot will send them over to you. So welcome to our live viewers. Mary's here, and she says hello. Hi, Mary. I'm glad you're with us. And if you are somebody watching us on the replay, I also encourage you to type in any questions or comments that you have during the show, because I always come back later and I can respond to those. So welcome to everybody this morning, and we will get started because I want to make sure that we go through our little set things here. So it's always like, okay, what do I do next? How do I bring up the next thing? Like I said, the first video that we had in this series was about changing your lens. Instead of looking at my kid could do better if he wanted, we learned that all kids do well if they can. The second video in the series, we talked about how to identify those lagging skills that your child or student might have, and look and really specifically define those unsolved problems. Like I said, today we're going to be talking about Plan B, Plan C, and Plan A. But if you want links to our previous 2 videos, just let me know in the comments and I can give you those links. So Plan B is what Dr. Ross Greene encourages us to use, because it's a more collaborative process between the adults, like the parents or the teachers, and the child or the student. And sometimes you might have to use a Plan C. And Plan C is when you have unsolved problems, but it's not like a priority, or it's not the right time to work on that unsolved problem. So sometimes with Plan C, you have to put that unresolved problem to the side. And especially if things are heated, you want time for everybody to calm down, right? And then plan A is the one that has the most caution. And that's the one that most of us probably have been raised on as far as this is what we experienced as kids. And so it's like adults making demands of us, expecting compliance. And when we don't do that, usually then the adult implements some kinds of consequences, right, for our behavior. And so many times, plan A is what we default to because, like I said, that's what we've grown up with. That's the kind of training that we've had. But we really want to only use plan A if it's like some extreme dangerous situation, right? But what we want to do is really understand that plan B model where we're working collaboratively with our child. And we'll talk about some accommodations that you can use to the model if, for instance, if your child doesn't verbally speak. So how can we, use a plan B collaborative model with all kinds of kids, with all kinds of strengths and needs. So if you have questions, if you know about Ross Greene, I'd love for you to write in the comments your experience with learning about his work, because I just really feel like it's such a more positive way that we can interact with kids. So again, if you want the cheat sheets, just type in cheat sheets. We're going to look a little bit more detail about Plan B, since that's the one that we really prefer to use. And with Plan B, you first have to know what that specific unsolved problem is. So if you watched our last video, we talked about lagging skills, the skills that your child doesn't have yet. And it's not because they're bad or they want to bug you. It's just a developmental thing that they haven't, reached certain skills. And that will lead to usually those unsolved problems. So the goal of Plan B is to not only solve the problem, but to teach your child those skills that they're lagging in right now. So tips that Ross Greene gives is to make sure that you do this collaborative discussion in private when both you and your child are calm. And you want to make sure that you focus on the behavior, not the student. So there's 3 steps with Plan B. And the first step is called empathy step. And this is really important because this is going to help you gather information and try to really get to understand your child's concerns, their perspectives about the unsolved problem. So with Plan B, there's different opening statements that you can use to kind of, start the conversation. And one that's used often is, I've noticed that, and you say, what's up? So it's just, like I said, kind of it's a non-judgmental way to say, that you've observed something, but you're not, putting judgment words in there. So it's just a quick, I've noticed that, you seem to be angry, or I've noticed that you're going to your bedroom a lot after school. What's up? And so it's just a way to have that as a communication starter. And like I said, usually you want to make sure, if this is a process that they're using at school, that the teachers are trained in this process, because it's super important that it's an objective way of looking at things. And so Lissa's here. Hey, Lissa, I'm glad you are with us live. Lissa, I was telling people, if you want to type in cheat sheet, I'll give you, or my IEP bot will send you the links for the cheat sheets. So the empathy step is going to be really important with Plan B. And we want to make sure that, like I said, that we're using things that will open up the conversation, but not be judgmental. Now, the process that you're going to go through is really a process that probably most of you are familiar with as far as reflective listening. Repeating back what your child has said. Make sure that you understand that you ask some clarifying questions like, can you give me an example? Or, when did that happen? Or, I want to make sure I understand. Is this what you mean? And then when you're trying to really tap into that unsolved problem, as many specifics as you can get from your child, that's going to be really helpful. So you want to try and get those details of like, when did this happen? Was it on the playground? Was it after school? Who was with you? Did you have a friend? Was it, this one student that's bugging you a lot? Those kinds of detailed questions are going to be really helpful, because more specific you are as far as the who, what, when, where kinds of things of when you see that unsolved problem happening, that's going to help you then when you're looking at one, skills that your child needs to be taught, and two, what would be some potential ways to be proactive when that situation happens again. Because as much as possible, we want more prevention strategies and teachers taking time to do that versus teachers taking time to kind of reprimand kids when they aren't doing what they were asked to do. So as much as possible, when we're proactive, that's when we're going to get the positive benefits of, working collaboratively with our kids. When you're going through and clarifying questions, you really want to check yourself and say, do I fully understand what my child's perspective is? Is there anything that doesn't make sense and maybe you need to ask for some more clarification? You really want to take your time with each of these steps. And especially you don't want to skip any of the steps. Like sometimes people have like, oh, I already know what's happening. We don't have to sit down and talk about that anymore. But you really do need to start at that level where you are empathizing with your child, connecting with them on a different level versus being an angry parent or an angry teacher. You can't, like I said, you can't assume that you know what your child's concern is. And the other caution is when you're in the empathy step, which is step one, you don't want to start all of a sudden coming up with different solutions. And that can be something else that's almost like this knee-jerk reaction, because as parents, as teachers, we want to fix things. We want to solve things, right? But we are much more effective if we wait until we really have all these other steps in place before we start brainstorming any solutions. So again, say hi if you are here with us live. Say hi if you're watching the replay. Kelly says, I love the listening and asking. So empowering for the child instead of just jumping to conclusions on our part. Exactly, exactly. I know, that's like so huge. And that's why, I think sometimes we just think, oh, we've seen this before, we know what's going on, but we really need to take that step back. The other thing that's so neat too about that empathy step is it just gives us permission to like sit down and, maybe like cuddle with your child and just, say, what's up, bud, and in our busy lives and world, sometimes we just don't have that time to make that connection. So I see so many benefits to just having that time to sit down with your child. It really is pretty awesome what happens. So let's look at some accommodations. So I've had different parents talk about, well, my child doesn't use verbal language. I'm not sure if I ask him these questions, how am I going to get him to respond? So you need to think ahead of time, what are ways that your child communicates? So if it's not verbally, are there pictures that your child uses? Does your child have a communication device or an app on their iPad that they use for communication? Because this is a collaborative give and take, you don't want to be the only one talking. You don't want to be the only person, kind of figuring out different things. So you got to be sometimes creative of how am I going to make sure that my child has a way to communicate back with me? If your child answers yes or no questions, then think of how you can phrase your questions so they're yes or no and they can respond. If your child does use a communication device or an app, make sure there are phrases in there, there's vocabulary, language in there that your child can use in a situation where they're trying to tell you what they're, concerned about or sad about or afraid of. So that communication language needs to be in their device or app, or other ways that they communicate. Think about that, because I don't want you to dismiss this and say, oh, that's just a process you can use with kids that talk. No, you can use it with other students too, and it's important for them to have their voice in the process, right? So we want to make sure that we make use of accommodations if we need to. So step 2 is to define the problem. And this is when we're looking at usually the other person's problem or the other person's concern with the unsolved problem. So this is usually the adult. So in step 1, the empathy step, you are identifying your child's concerns. And step 2, when you define the problem, you're looking at yourself, or the teacher is looking at themselves as far as what are my concerns with the behavior. So if the student is, climbing on the counters at school and pulling things out of the cupboards and throwing different things, as an adult, your concern is probably like, 1, I wonder what's going on. And obviously the student's trying to tell me something. And 2, your concern is, I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want anybody else in the class to get hurt. So in step 2 of Plan B, you want to be identifying the concerns that you have with that unsolved problem. So yes, and Kelly said cheat sheets. So remember, you'll get 4 different cheat sheets, and Jessica's here with us too, that you can go back and use. And like I said, people really need to go through a training, and Ross Greene has a variety of workshops and trainings online, in person, that you can tap into. So I encourage you to do that as a parent, or have your school take part in some of the trainings too. The other thing when you look at Plan B is phrases that you can use. And it's almost like sometimes when you're first doing this, you do need this little cheat sheet of like, oh yeah, what am I supposed to say next? So a common phrase that you can use is, the thing is, and then you can say you're concerned. The thing is, I'm really trying to figure out what you're trying to tell us when you climb up on the counters and throw things. Or you could say, my concern is, are you going to be safe? I don't want you to fall off. So you, again, are taking ownership of what your concerns are in the situation. So the process is that you identify your concern and how it is affecting the child and or affecting others, which could be other students in the room, could be other kids in your house, could be you and your husband. So this part of the Plan B is looking at the adult concerns. Again, you want to check yourself for understanding before you go to the next step. You want to make sure, did I really explain this clearly enough so my child understands the concern? The cautions here are still with step 2. You don't want to talk about solutions yet, and you don't want to, fall into that lecturing, judging, or sarcasm kinds of things. So those are the first 2 steps. Let me know if you have any questions, or I would love to know if any of your school districts or buildings in your school district are using Ross Greene's collaborative proactive solutions. This is something that I think schools talk about, positive behavior strategies, but so many times I don't see them as positive. So many times schools that talk about positive behavior strategies are still punishing kids, still taking recess away from kids, still calling parents to come pick their kids up early. So just because the title says positive behavior intervention strategies and the school says, oh, we do this, you really have to look at the practice and what happens. Just like if your school says, oh, we've been trained in Ross Greene's work, we do collaborative, proactive solutions. And then you find out they're really not implementing it like it was written, like it's supposed to be done. So as parents, you always need to have that ongoing conversation and make sure that what they say matches with what happens at school, right? So sometimes there can be a big difference there. So step 3, and I've got this up here to find the problem. I need to change that. It's step 3 is the invitation. And this is the invitation to brainstorm some solutions. So we're finally getting to some solutions here. And what's really important is that the solutions have to be something that you can live with as an adult and something that the child can live with. And it's not only living with, but you also both need to have some confidence that the solution is going to be workable. And we'll talk in a minute if you try that plan B and the solution didn't work, because that can happen too, right? But what we're doing in step 3 at the invitation level is to start that brainstorming process. So step 3, and now I can't change these, but it's the invitation. The phrases that you can use are, I wonder if there's a way, and you want to make sure that when you're brainstorming solutions, that you're talking about those unsolved problems that you've already identified, okay? So don't go down this rabbit's trail and talk about something that has nothing to do with the concerns that you first identified. So you just have to keep yourself on track and keep your child on track when you start brainstorming solutions and making sure that there's something that both of you can live with. The process that you're going to use it's always helpful, I think, to ask your child first for their ideas of how this could be resolved. But also you're going to be either a partner with your child, or at school there might be, more than just the teacher and the child, but you want to have that team approach when you're problem solving. And I think this applies when I think about it as far as when you're problem solving with teachers. I always try to help parents see, is there a way that you can get the teacher to come up with an idea that is really going to be workable, because then that teacher has more ownership in it. And it makes a huge difference versus as a parent coming in and making these suggestions, and you feel like they're suggestions, and the teacher feels like you're threatening and saying she's not doing a good job and all this other thing. So instead, with your child, when you're coming up with solutions, or when you're working with a teacher, see if they can't come up with an idea first. They will have more ownership with that. And let's see. And again, before you go off and feel like, we resolved everything, you want to check for understanding. Did you get all the concerns and solutions really well defined? And can you summarize those? Do both parties agree to use the solution? And do you feel like the solutions really address those bottom line concerns that you had talked about earlier? The caution with the invitation step is, again, don't rush through it. Don't agree just to agree. That's not going to work. And if you can't come to any kind of agreement, then what's best is to return to those, I'm not sharing, to return to those beginning steps of Plan B and work through the process again. The other thing to know is that there are times when your solution you came up with Plan B doesn't work. And then it's kind of like, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board, right? And come up with some other ideas. So Plan B is the one that's preferred. That's that collaborative process behind or between the adult and the child. Plan C, sometimes you might have to use it if things aren't calm, if you just need to set that aside and have some space and time, then that's called Plan C, when you just kind of put it aside for now. Plan A is the one that you want to use the least, and usually this is just in really dangerous kind of situations where the adult makes the decision, I'm going to grab my kid's arm and pull him in off the street so they don't get hit by the car. But Plan A is what so many times, like I said, I think that we've been raised with, so that's kind of our go-to solution. And what I'm hoping is that this perked some of your interests, so you would love to learn more about Ross Greene's process. It's called CPS, or Collaborative Proactive Solutions. Yes, so Kelly says, if you type cheat sheets again when you get the first message, then my bot automatically sends you the link for the 4 cheat sheets. So that's pretty good. So yes, Mary says, is Ross Greene one of the writers, editors of The Explosive Child? It sounds like the collaborative problem-solving process described in that book. Exactly, Mary, you're right. And he also wrote Lost at School, and he's had some other books out. And he first called his process collaborative problem solving, CPS. And then, I don't know, kind of recently changed it. He kept the initials, but he changed it to collaborative proactive solutions. And I think his encouragement is if we can use Plan B as a proactive way of interacting with kids instead of getting to the point where it is a dangerous situation, that things will be resolved more quickly and more effectively. So yeah, Mary, he's the same person. Yeah, his books are great. And like I said, he's got a lot of resources on his website too. So if you want to get the link for the first video we did about changing your lens and how you see children, or you want the link to the second video where we talked about how to identify lagging skills and unsolved problems, just let me know in the comments and I can send you those links so you can see. This is the third and final video of this series about Ross Greene's process. I'm hoping, wouldn't it be nice if I reach out to Ross Greene that he could actually be a guest on my show. So if you'd love to hear Ross Greene himself, let me know in the comments. We'll see how much interest there is. And yeah, it'd be pretty awesome for him to be here and be able to answer your questions directly. So let me know if you're interested in that. The other thing I wanted to share with you is next Thursday is my 100th Facebook Live show 100, 10, 20, 30, 40. So we're going to celebrate next week. There'll be lots of giveaways. If you have been on previous shows, you know I love giving away books and a variety of tools that are helpful for you as parents and staff. So tune in next Thursday. It's the 100th Facebook Live show. Maybe I can even find some bloopers we can laugh about. But my whole purpose is to be able to give you some tools, some information each week to connect with you because you feed me as far as these are the concerns, these are the things that you are interested in. So I love getting feedback from you as far as how I can be helpful. I do, work for families who hire me, but I love to be able to give free resources such as this weekly Facebook Live show. So you can always share this with others that you think might be interested and let them know. Thursdays, we are here live at noon Mountain Time. And yeah, Kelly says 100. Congratulations. I know. I think back to the times where I was like totally frightened about getting on live shows, and I'm a little bit better now. And Mary says, a yes vote for me for having Ross Greene on. And Kelly says yes to Ross being here. So, and Kelly also said that she'd like the links to the first two because she must have missed them. Yes, and Dinah is here with us, and she says, I'd love to hear Ross Greene. I know, Dinah, I figure, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? So sometimes when there's well-known people, it's like, but I'm going to be vulnerable and put myself out there and introduce myself and see if we can't get him to be on one of our shows. So that's exciting. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Take time to cuddle, read a book, have a conversation, play soccer, do something fun with your kiddos. And until next week, take care.